Hey, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Next Level Healing. I'm your host, Dr. Tara Perry. After spending a night in jail on a bogus domestic violence charge, former couples therapist, my guest today, Abby Havermann, uncovers the self-betrayals that led up to her arrest, learning that liberation is an inside job. From unworthiness to physical ailments, we heal from within. With 30 years of experience in psychotherapy, financial advising, executive coaching, teaching, and training, Abby is going to share with us how to unwire habits of thought and emotion that no longer serve us. Welcome, Abby.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I loved seeing your TED Talk. Tell us the story behind that. Why? I love the self-empowerment of realizing that healing, liberation is an inside job. Give us the story behind that TED Talk and what brought you to do it.
Yeah. Thank you. I was super passionate about that message. I want to say from the get-go that there was a lot of cuts in the initial story that Ted wanted to cut, which I understood in hindsight. I could have told that story a lot of different ways. But what essentially happened was I was a couples therapist. My husband was also, we met when we were both working on in a hospital. He was also a counselor, a really, really brilliant one. He ended up relapsing on pain meds during our marriage. And so we were separating. I was about to leave him, and we had this scuffle one morning that never happened. And people misunderstand that story. It's really not a domestic violence story. We never had that in our marriage. But he was very out of it. He shoved me. I slapped him. The cops came in Colorado. There's a mandatory arrest law, so they had to arrest somebody. I did not know that. I was very deep in my codependency, don't want the neighbors to see what's going on, want to make sure that he doesn't go to jail, and all these things. And while I was busy doing that, getting my son across the street and all this stuff, we were telling the cops two different things. He was omitting that he shoved me, and I was saying, no, it didn't hurt. It's fine. You can go. They took me to jail and arrested me. And because there were no judges to hear the case that day, I had to spend the night in jail. And so,
oh, jeez.
Yeah. So it was really a thing. And it was a really dark night of the soul because, we always hear this saying, like there's pain and then there's suffering, right? We can't get around pain, but suffering is optional. And I was really suffering. And one of the ways that I was suffering was just the horrible shame of having had this happen as a therapist. Like I had a caseload of people that I was supposed to see, the next day or the day after that, the treatment was kind of predicated on my having my shit together. And here I was, So I first just had this just immense shame reaction. And then of course, so much rage, like, I can't believe the cops were this stupid. I can't believe he threw me under the bus like this, all these things. And I had, 5 friends come and visit me in jail and that night. And I remember I had this conversation with, I said, what am I going to do? Like 2 of them were therapists where I went to graduate school with them. And they're passing the phone around to each other. And one of my friends telling me that my son's okay. She's watching the house. She's having a welfare check done, all these things. And my friend who I went to graduate school with, I just said, what am I going to do? And when I said that, I meant like, what am I going to do like globally? Like, I am so mortified. I am so humiliated. Like, what in the world? And she said something that I never forgot. She said, this does not define you. Not as a mother, not as a wife, and not as a therapist. You are going to go lay down. You are going to close your eyes and you're going to pray for your next right step. And I kind of shuffled away, just, like, all right, yeah, I mean, that's bad. I can't dig out of here with the plastic spoon I was issued, so I might as well try that. And I get back to this overcrowded jail cell. I'm like on a cot on the floor. And I just remember just flipping and flopping and just, I wanted to just come out of my skin. I was just I wanted to claw myself out of there. I thought, if I can't see my son tonight, I'm not going to be able to breathe. I had like a toddler and I just thought I was not going to be able to make it. And then all of a sudden I remembered what she said. And so I just started saying, next right step, next right step, next right step. And it just all became all became apparent. You know how you have those moments where it's like you connect with something that is outside of you completely, and you get intel that you just is not available to you otherwise. And I really came to see that, like my whole life kind of flashed before my eyes. And it was like, all of this was about my trying to feel worthy, marrying him in the first place, needing to get married, having to get married, the whole codependent behavior throughout our marriage, all of these things, my fear about how the world was going to view me and see me having now in this situation, even becoming a couples therapist, which I loved. And I had a great practice. But in hindsight, I realized, I really did that because I was afraid I was too stupid to go to business school. This is just something that came easily to me, naturally to me. So I really realized through that, as angry as I was at everyone, that really I was most angry at myself because I had betrayed myself. I had betrayed myself, not just, throughout my whole marriage and having to get married and believing all this time that it was about my marriage. My life would start when I had a marriage. But even on that morning, right, I was worried about them arresting him. I didn't want them to arrest him. Primarily, I was honestly worried about the neighbors seeing what was going on with the resident couples therapist. I, of course, was worried about getting my son to my neighbors to safety and all of those things. But if I had just focused on myself, if I had just said, this is what happened, and, instead of being so worried about everything else and covering for other people, I betrayed myself that morning as well. So it was sort of like my whole life up until that point, when I looked at it, there was really no other place for me to go but jail. Like my behavior, my thoughts about myself, my unworthiness, all of this stuff, I was already in prison. It just made perfect sense that I would wind up there. So, that's kind of the story of how that happened. And that awakening was sort of something where it was like, okay, well, if I want to unwire this, who do I need to be?
So many. Hey guys, studies are showing that 68% of people that watch podcasts regularly don't click the subscribe button. Do me a huge favor. If you like this content, click subscribe so other people know where to go for the cool stuff. Thank you. People, when they have an incident happen to them that most of us would regard as bad, look back and go, wow, that was the best thing that ever happened to me. Is that kind of the way you looked at when you look back at it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, 1,000%. It took a long time. But absolutely. I mean, listen, I was so passionate about that message. I did a TED Talk on it. I have an incredible marriage now. I mean, it was really like, they say that, you can imprint, your brain in a couple different ways, right? We can practice behavior over and over and over again, or sometimes just a really sudden event can be so jarring to our internal world that we unmemorize a behavior immediately. And so for me, unworthiness, as it was related to my love life, like unwired, like done with that.
So how did that marriage unfurl, and how did you attract a healthier marriage into your life?
So I was leaving him the next day anyway. So after I got back, I had a friend pick me up from jail the next morning. I had a court appearance that afternoon, and I had all of my friends' husbands came to my house to just move me out. And so we then went through the process of, separating and divorcing. And there was loads more drama that happened after that because he was really very sick at the time. But about 6 months later, I was ready to date again. This is actually a good story. I like to tell this to people who are looking for love because it works. I didn't know really anything at the time about the law of attraction. I really didn't. I learned that actually my husband now probably was the one that introduced me to it. And yet what happened was I was so anxious. I had a 3-year-old, my life was falling apart. My ex was in the hospital, like all these things were happening and I couldn't sleep at night. So I was so anxious. I realized though, that the only way I could sleep was if I closed my eyes and I really just envisioned the life that I wanted. And and in that I imagined the partner that I wanted. And I knew exactly what I wanted because I knew exactly what I didn't want. So it was really easy to say, this is important and this is important. I want someone who's affectionate and I want someone who's financially whatever. And I want someone who obviously is going to be a father to my child and, all of those things. And I went to sleep like that every night. And when I thought about that, my body was able to relax enough. And the thought that I had, which is really important to remember when you're thinking about manifesting these things, not that that's what we're talking about today, but it's a topic of interest to a lot of people, is that I wasn't just sort of thinking about it. I really embodied it. And I always put at the end of it, I was like, I am worthy of that. Like I really believed it. I'm like, no, I am totally worthy of that. Like, why wouldn't I be worthy of that? Like, I have a lot to get. And I just landed in me in a different way. And I thought, there is someone out there for me. And if there isn't, it's okay. I can be alone. That's fine. But I'm worthy of all these things. And 30 days later, to the day,
wow,
I met my husband. Yeah. Yeah. The other thing is you got to listen to the universe, right? I had 3 people that week say, you should really do online dating. And I was like, and I'd been a couples therapist for long enough. And it was back in the time when that was very unusual, but I had walked a lot of single women through it in my practice. So by the time it came to me, I was like, sure, I'll do that. I don't care. I'm not going to go hang out at bars. And he was the first person I met online.
Very cool. Yeah, again, the thing that when I saw that, I thought, wow, I love this. I love the idea of just stepping into our power, realizing that liberation, women's liberation, anybody's liberation is an inside job. Tell us the story about the sexting and the young women and why they did it. Because this is a really good eye-opener for, women's sense of self-worth.
Yes. So this was huge. And that really led to ultimately to the TED Talk. When my kids, so that was when my son was 3. Well, 10 years later, he and his stepbrother, they were 3 months apart. They're 13 years old. They're in middle school. And there was a assembly for internet safety. And I went to it. And I was sitting in the back of the auditorium. It was mostly kids. And they had some deputies come from Jefferson County in Colorado at that time. They had a separate squad that was specifically dealing with this problem of sexting because kids were sending naked pictures to one another. And the problem at the time was that the law said that is child pornography. That is intention to distribute child pornography. And they were trying to impress upon the kids, like, look, these are all the things that you can do and you can get off on. But as soon as you hit this level of this particular crime, that goes on your record. There's nothing we can do for you. And so they were really trying to impress us on their kids. And they told a couple of really devastating stories. One was that, this one girl was talked into, had a boyfriend. They'd been boyfriend and girlfriend in high school for a few years. She was talked into doing something with the boyfriend in the front seat of the car while the best friend was filming it. And it was graduation day. And she went back to the cafeteria and she got a standing ovation and she didn't know why. And she went home. She was supposed to go pick up her gown or something like that. But she went home and she took her life. She took her own life. And it was so devastating. And then another story about this girl who had the same kind of thing. She sexted a picture. The boyfriend got angry at her for some reason and then sent it off into the universe. The cops said that it probably had been copied like 750,000 times. And she ultimately had a degree in aeroscience, but she could never get a job because every time they pulled her up on the internet, this is all they saw. So the cops were saying that whenever they interview the girls and the boys always say the same thing. They say, why did you do this? And the boys always say, because I want to see a picture of her naked, right? And that's what boys want to do. Like, that's why I asked her to send it to me. But when they asked the girls, why did you send it? They always said the same thing. And when I was sitting there in the auditorium, I knew exactly what it was. Like, and I mouthed the words. They said, because I wanted him to love me. I haven't told this story, Tara, in a while, and I normally tear up when I tell it, like it's been years. But it just literally got me because I was like, holy shit, nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. I grew up in the 1970s. These kids, it's this conditioning that we've had that's just being handed down, and this unconscious belief that our only value is in our sexuality. And I remember growing up, I don't know about you, but I mean, I remember growing up and thinking, oh yeah, I'm going to be the cool girl, right? I'm going to be hang out with the guys. I'm going to need nothing because that was sexy, right? Like bring home the bacon, fry it in a pan, never let you forget me. I don't need anybody. I'm going to need nothing. And I'm going to be, and if I put out, then those are the two things that will attract a man. There was never a thought about like, do I want this guy? Do I care about him? It was always, does he like me? Does he like me? Is this one, can I catch this one? I mean, it was so crazy desperate. And it's still going on today. And it's totally unconscious.
What's the big key to unlocking that? Because as we know, our subconscious mind is processing 40 million bits of information, roughly, give or take, several million. And our conscious mind is only processing 40 bits of information. So if you're trying to get something into your being and your reactions and your habitual thoughts and beliefs, how does one go about, you got jolted awake, I guess, with the experience of realizing that you were in fact worthy and should not have been cooped up in a jail cell. But how do other people, go about, how do you help other people go about doing that?
Well, I mean, I think one of the things is the first thing that, women need to do is really get honest about what is the truth. And, Gurdjieff, who was a mystic in the early 1900s, he talks about how we are constantly lying to ourselves as humans. We are always lying to ourselves and we are justifying those lies. And the truth is, I have never met anybody who, when I've drilled down, it is not an unworthiness issue. I've never met anyone like that. And so, but that is something that women are very reticent to admit. And I was too. If you had told me, listen, you've got an unworthiness problem, I'd say, you're crazy. I've got a thriving private practice. I, live in a beautiful house. I got an adorable child. I got tons of friends. I like myself. But the subconscious context, right, was always there. And it's like, you can like yourself, but do you really love yourself? No. And I think it's very hard for women to acknowledge that, for anybody really to acknowledge it, because it means you're vulnerable. And it also, I think we've been conditioned to really be able to do all the things. And to say that I feel unworthy is something that, or that I, not even that I feel it, but that I like, that's a belief that's in me. That is something that women are like, no, I can do anything. I can take care of anybody. I don't need that. I don't need a man. And they say out of one side of their mouth, I don't need a man. And then on the other side of their mouth, they say, well, I want someone who's going to take care of me and who, will hold me and all this. I'm like, how are they going to hold you when you don't need anybody? It's such a contradiction. So a lot of it is like, let's get honest here, people. Like, what is all this bravado? I don't need anybody. What is all that bullshit? That's just bravado. It's just personality. It's just protection.
Yeah, it's a protective mechanism, because I definitely can identify with that when I was younger. It's building up a wall and saying, I'm self-sufficient, I don't need you. And that isn't very attractive to men anyway.
Right.
Well, except the ones that want to be taken care of.
Exactly. The ones that want to be taken care of and aren't really emotionally available. And so what I always tell people is that we attract people who are at the same level of tolerance of intimacy as we are. And nobody wants to believe that. They always want to say, no, I'm completely emotionally available. It's just these guys I keep meeting, they're not available at all. That's bullshit. We are only attracted to people that can tolerate the same level of closeness as we can.
How can somebody know what their level of availability for intimacy is?
Look at their life. What is it bringing you? What is your reflection right now? Are you constantly, in relationships with people who are unavailable? Are you constantly not in relationships? Are you always the one doing everything? Are you the one who guys are coming after and you're distancing? If you don't have the relationship you want, it's one of two things. You haven't met somebody with the same level of closeness. And typically, if you have, you're not happy in that relationship because you've got this idea that you want something closer and you can do it. But if you're not meeting the guy that meets that, you're not there. So because someone who truly believes in their worth is not attracted to someone who doesn't reflect that back. They're not. They would be like, be like if someone said, well, your hair is purple, and be like, no, it's not. My hair isn't purple. So when I met my husband now, for example, like I had to really kind of come up against myself about that a little bit, because he was very available. And I kept thinking, God, this guy must be a real loser. Like, what's going on here? Because I was always that Woody Allen, like I wouldn't want to be part of a club that would have me. And so I had to kind of come up against it and say, wait a minute, I asked for someone who was affectionate. I asked for somebody who knew what they wanted. I asked for someone who would claim me, and every time I kind of tried to come back, he was like, yeah, I don't like that. That's not attractive to me, what you're doing right now, pushing me away, And so it's a process, but you have to constantly be looking at how you are behaving, how you are feeling, and what is being reflected to you in your world.
Were you able to be your own therapist through that, or did you reach out to somebody to be a mirror for you?
Well, so listen, I was in therapy, from the beginning, because when I went to school, I went to Smith College School for Social Work, which is one of the, was at that point in the top 10 for clinical schools in the country. And I was always in therapy. In fact, I was in therapy with one of the lead training analysts in the area, and for years. And I actually did a stint of analysis. And then when I started my private practice, I continued to do it. And I also always hired outside consultants so that I could be on top of my countertransference. Like I was always pretty responsible about that. And my therapist was with me through the whole time, through a terrible breakup and through when I actually married my ex. And we were both kind of snowed. It was sort of like, there was no way to get to that underlying content in the therapy relationship, because the way that therapy works, just only talking, and there's so much smoke and mirrors, that goes on. I remember saying, well, my husband, my ex, I was referring to, my husband, to be like, oh, I just wish he were a little younger, or I wish he were a little more ambitious. And I remember my therapist saying to me, well, and he was a phenomenal therapist, and he was like, well, if you want to make money, why couldn't you make it? And I was like, damn right. Why couldn't I make it? Why am I counting myself out? Which is true. But at the same time, there's nothing wrong with wanting to be in a marriage with someone who also cares about finance. But at the time, the subcontext that wasn't said out loud was, you're right. Shame on me for wanting something so shallow. That's what I was thinking. So yes, I was in therapy, but it didn't necessarily reflect back to me. And then when I went through the actual divorce, I was also in therapy with a different therapist, because I couldn't afford my therapist at that time. And I literally just was putting one foot in front of the other. It wasn't a very insightful therapy. I mean, there are times in your life when you're just going through it and all you can handle is someone just supporting you, and that was really all I could handle at that time.
So for the people, do you work just with women or men and women?
No, I work with men and women. Yeah. And I'm not.
So to somebody listening to this whose ears are perked up and they're going, oh, I might have some of this stuff going on with me. What first steps would they take? A book, listening to you on YouTube, reaching out and having a consultation of some kind. What would the first steps be?
Yeah. So the first thing is probably to go and download my free ebook, which is 7 Steps to Stop Self-Sabotage, to try and uncover some of these thoughts. And then that will trigger an opportunity for a free consult, which, they can also reach out to me directly and do that as well. There's a lot of stuff on my website. I do courses and groups, and there's an online course called From Hot Mess to Harmony on my website that is great. I think it's great for everybody, but particularly for women, and specifically about this issue that we're talking about right now.
And your website address is?
abbyhavermann.com, www.abbyhavermann.com.
Okay, and that's Havermann, correct?
Correct, and ABBY. Yeah.
Cool. So what are the biggest sort of transformations you've seen? Somebody who suddenly got an epiphany and realized, oh my goodness, there was a pattern that I was engaged with, and I was self-sabotaging. What kind of changes have you seen in the clients that you've worked with? In what kind of time period? What kind of relief are they getting, and what does that look like?
Yeah, there's an immediate relief, I think, that happens very, very quickly. The unwiring process takes a little longer. But, I work with, it's funny. I don't always work with women around relationships and women looking for love is not really my particular bailiwick, although I do have some clients that are doing that. But I tend to work with women who lead women, executive business owning women. And they come with, and usually moms or grandmoms, so that they have like kind of the whole full picture. They're spinning a gajillion plates, and they're really basing their worth on how good they're doing at all of it. How well their company's doing, how well their staff is doing, if they met this mark, if they got on this stage, if their kids are happy or not happy. Everything is sort of being run through a filter of I'm worthy if. And so, for example, I've had people come to me like on the brink, just like my business is, like I'm so ashamed. I have to do layoffs. I can't believe I let this happen. They're literally like just paralyzed in shame around, whatever it is that happened. And so the first thing that we do is dial that back, identify the different parts of the personality. Like the shame is just a part. It's just one of your saboteurs inside of you. That's not the essence of you. And when we can move people from a state of stress, which doesn't take very long at all. I mean, you can literally move whatever you're doing, if you're using a heart math, or sometimes it's a little meditation that I'm doing, or maybe it's a positive intelligence thing, or there's so many different ways that we can move people from that left side of the brain where they're just running. I know you know this because you do it through, other means, right? And we talked about that. But you can move them into the part of their brain where they're no longer analytical. They suddenly are connecting with the spirit within, with their essence of who they are. And there's only truth there. And so then suddenly you're like, wait a minute, I'm a creative. Why would I know all these things about finance? I never asked. All of a sudden now it's like, I was all of a sudden like, well, I could reach out to, this finance guy I know. And it's like, well, what? And why haven't you done that before? It's not your bailiwick, right? You're a creative. Well, I haven't done it before because I got this idea that I got to do it all myself, or I'm a loser, right? So now all of a sudden, all these things are available and they're like, okay, I get it. And not only that, this was a gift because now I know. Now, next year at this time, I'm going to be playing at a much bigger level. And I want to learn whatever brought me here today. I want to learn this now so that next year I'm going to save all that money because I'm not going to make this mistake again. So
you also have quite a background in financial advising. So it sounds like you do help a lot of people in leadership roles that result in, once they get their emotional mental house in order, that they can perform better and probably with greater ease. Is that correct? And better results.
1,000%. Yeah. And I wouldn't say I did work in the financial industry for a long time because I worked with my husband, but I understand that industry and what financial executives are up against in their businesses pretty well. But I would not, though I was technically a financial advisor because I had to get the licensure to be able to work in the office. My husband did all the back end stuff. Like that is not, what I did, but absolutely. Like when you begin to understand, when you become mentally fit and you begin to understand how to manage your inner world, like we're never given a manual, right, for our brain and the way the brain and body work together. It's the biggest piece of technology we have available to us. And there's no manual for it. And everybody is running around in their own silos thinking they're the only ones that feel this way. They're the only, and it's so insane, right? And it's literally all of everyone.
Yeah, it does. So, my next question is going to be, what percentage of people, and you can go by men and women or just in general, have an unworthiness issue?
Oh, 100. I mean, I really believe it. I really believe it. I've never had anybody come to me and I've seen a lot of things. I mean, I've been doing this a long time, whether it was in my practice or, my psychotherapy practice, my coaching practice. I have never not been able to, in my mind at least, drill back to whatever this unhelpful behavior is, comes down to worthiness. Am I enough? Am I enough?
And what's so crazy is that crosses socioeconomic lines,
Yep.
Education lines, wealth lines. I mean, all kinds of lines.
Yes. And the quicker we can embody it and admit it, the quicker we can get out of it, right? The quicker we can deal with it.
I love it. Abby, is there anything else? If you were to travel back in time and you were there with 10-year-old Abby, what would you say to her?
10-year-old Abby. Let me tell you, 10-year-old Abby was being drugged to therapy because she was so angry. And I could draw one thing. I only knew how to draw one thing, a horrible artist, but my friend taught me how to draw 2 mice and a baby mouse holding hands. And we went to the therapist, and the therapist told my mother that I was upset about the divorce based on this picture. And we left, and I said, "Oh, Mom, she's brilliant." That was a really tough one to figure out. 10-year-old Abby, I would say, you know what, girl, it's okay. You see things that other people don't see. And you don't have to call them all out because not everybody's going to see them. And just because your truth is not being reflected back to you doesn't mean that it's not true. You're operating at a different level of consciousness, and there's something inside you that is ready to come out. And just be with it. Don't worry about the people who aren't with you. It's okay.
Fantastic. And if you had a bullhorn and the whole world could hear what you're going to say for a few minutes, what would you want the whole world to know?
I would want the whole world to know that empowerment cannot be bestowed. It is generated within.
Love it. Love it.
Yeah.
So good. So, Abby, I just want to thank you so much for being here on Next Level Healing. I want everybody to know they can find you at abbyhavermann.com. That's ABBYHAVERMANN.com. Are there any other resources or things that you'd like to say to people in closing?
No, definitely check out my TED Talk, though, and throw a comment up there. I'd love to hear, your thoughts about it. But everything that you need is probably on my website, and definitely go to the blog section, jump on my newsletter, download that free ebook, and feel free to reach out to me.
Awesome. Thanks so much for taking the time to be here with us today, Abby.
Thank you. This was so much fun. Thanks.
And if you got value out of this, which I know you did, please click like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next episode of Next Level Healing.